Welcome to you all. It's good to see you all here. It is my privilege to welcome you here on behalf of Gordon College and the Center for Faith and Inquiry. My name is Paul Brink, and I am the director of CFI, though I work very closely with colleagues from all across campus, especially in the Adams School of Music and the Arts, and in our events team, especially Lauren Colt. Today's lecture is the first offering in a series of CFI events that will continue throughout the academic year, all touching in some way on the theme of beauty and justice. At Gordon, we believe that the justice of God is not only unfolding, comprehensive, and restorative, but that it is also something beautiful. And if God is beautiful as well as just, then our response to beauty and to justice, they're likely to relate to each other, just as our efforts to create beauty and to seek justice will also relate to each other. But the ways that we might do this are not so obvious, and so I'm grateful to Mako and Haejin for helping us approach these questions. Let me introduce our guests. Haejin Fujimura is an accomplished attorney with over 20 years of experience serving in a range of nonprofit and for-profit organizations and companies. She's litigated many cases in federal and state courts, but more broadly seeks to strengthen organizations in their governance and their strategies towards proactive, healthy growth. But in addition to her legal work, Haejin is the CEO and co-founder of Embers International. It's a global NGO working to protect, restore, and empower the victims of injustice, particularly children born into brothels, and to break the cycles of intergenerational exploitation and to prevent human trafficking. And you may have noticed as you made your way in, there's a table with some material about Embers International, and I also encourage you to stop by the table on your way out. Mako Fujimura is a leading contemporary artist whose work has been featured in galleries and museums around the world, including Gordon College. In fact, one of his works, Golden Pines, can be found in this very building. If you go from the first to the second floor, most of you have probably seen or encountered every time you go to the second floor his work. Mako's process of art making has been described as, quote, a small rebellion against the quickening of time. I love that quote. Mako has a long history with Gordon, most notably the Quartets exhibition, which was a collaboration with our own Bruce Herman, the composer Christopher Theophanides, yes, and the theologian Jeremy Begbie, all working together in response to T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets. More recently, in the spring, Mako gave the commencement address here at Gordon and was awarded an honorary doctorate. Currently, he and Bruce together have a new show together, which is already up in our gallery. You're welcome to go see it any time, but come on Saturday at 4 p.m. in particular for the opening. Hope to see many of you there. Welcome to Gordon. Friends, please welcome our guests.
Thank you so much. It is great to be back. I was here for a beautiful commencement service, and I am grateful that the weather is like the same. Is it always like this nice? And it's also wonderful when I speak, I do ask that the institutions that's hosting me to speak, or both of us speak now, to host an exhibit, because that's what I do. Everything that I speak about comes out of my studio practice. And what I think about, what I pray about, my studio is the most sacred place. And so I think that in the context of my work, I can share what I'm about to share the best. And so what we're going to do today, since it is a twin bill, as it were, my wife and I will alternate. And I am going to start with my experience with beauty, and Haejin's going to pick up on the threads of justice, even though I always say she is the beauty and justice. So I just carry her bags, and I'm delighted to be here together for this conversation of faith and inquiry, beauty times justice. Next book is called Beauty and Justice, but it is designed with X in the middle for good reason. I really do believe that they are exponential partners, that they create this movement of the spirit moving into the world. And as God's children, as God's church, it is imperative that the world sees the church as that exponential power of providing beauty and justice to the world. I have written several books. One of the books is called Culture Care, and I just received a Spanish translation of this. Thank you to one of your people here. And it came out really over 20 years ago, but it was published broadly about 15, 16 years ago. And thinking about the polarity and the divisiveness of culture today and how culture is culture wars. As an artist, you get wedged or you're asked to stand in the gap between different tribal groups, different ideological frameworks. You are really providing this mediation as an artist, whether you're a musician or theater artist or writer or poet or visual artist. We tend to see the world in a certain way, not in a narrow reductivist way of false binaries, but we tend to bring in this prismatic complexity that actually brings beauty into the world that is very divided and sometimes war-torn. And so Culture Care talks about generativity, which actually is a legacy of my father, the scientist, and you will see my father's portrait in the exhibit. The scientist being painted by your own Bruce Herman many years ago. It is, to me, one of the most treasured paintings that I own. And because Bruce painted my father in a way that captured his soul. And to me, to be able to have these images, you see two actually, because one is a part of the quartet series, and my father is depicted in the winter panel. Bruce was able to capture him at the end of his life. So that's why my painting is in the science building. Because of my father, who spent time at MIT. I was born in Boston because my father was doing his postdoc research with Noam Chomsky, and in linguistics and acoustics, pioneer in so many of AI research that went into speech reproduction and so forth. So we are indebted to his research today in many ways. Genesis moments, creating Genesis moment comes out of that, because my father, who was known for bringing generative grammar theory into Japan, has influenced me, albeit in an unconscious way at first. I didn't even realize this, And I began to speak about generativity in culture and what are those generativity elements. I developed first 3 G's of generativity, easy to remember. One is Genesis moments, the other is generational thinking, and third is, I believe, gratitude. We have now 5, so I'm a little bit confused on the order, but in our new book, Beauty and Justice, Haejin and I just wrote and is coming out next spring, we have all these G's of generativity. How do we live a generative life? How do we live as artists and a lawyer, but both bringing beauty and justice into the world? How do we live our lives, no matter what you do, to live out your calling? Certainly as Christians, but even if you're not a believer or follower of Christ, you can certainly take these patterns of creating Genesis moments, living with gratitude and generosity, and having a generational thinking as your way, long-term thinking. And Haejin's going to talk a little bit about that. But we're going to focus on Genesis, creating Genesis moments. I came into New York City as an artist in the 90s. That's 1990s. Long time ago, maybe before, well, certainly before many of you were around. And I endeavored as a follower of Christ to live out my life as an artist. And if you imagine, it would be akin to going into an entirely different culture that is very hostile to Christianity and has no inkling of the origin story of how art or creativity or imagination or beauty came to be. They have lost that memory. So it is kind of crazy when you think about that, to come in as an artist, but really not hiding the fact that I am here because Jesus called me to be an artist, that this is fundamentally what I do and who I am. You cannot explicate my life as an artist from my life following Christ. I was very clear about this. I'm a high introvert, and I don't like to be in front of people like I am now. I much rather stay in my studio and do my quiet work, creating beauty. But I began to realize there was a call upon my life, that this was a work of advocacy. Advocacy for what? Well, certainly for what I believe. This integrated view of Jesus, following Jesus means loving God with all your mind and all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. And that means I am responsible in my own way to integrate what I do as an artist into every sphere. I was very fortunate to be mentored by none other than Tim Keller, a Redeemer, legendary pastor who started a Redeemer movement in New York City. When I joined the church, it was about 200 people in the audience. That's much like we're here, less than that, but it felt like this room when Redeemer started. And I heard Tim speak about loving the city, not being against the city, as most Christians are, but being for the city, but avoiding being of the city. So you are to stand out enigmatically, a burning bush that was no doubt confuse people in your stance, your belief, in your values, in what you do as an artist, as a human being. But so we moved children into the city at that point. I just met here, one of you was baptized in one of the church plants that we started. And so it's been a long journey of this, but I will tell you just one story as a Genesis moment story. When I began to exhibit in New York City, I was told multiple times by different people that do not use the word beauty at all in your statements, in public, when you talk about it with collectors, when you talk about it with galleries, certainly. That's like one word that you cannot use. And I asked, why? And there are all these reasons. This is part of this, tail end of Western hegemony, and it is a power game that institutions have played over the years to excuse their ways of hiding behind their power to exercise oppression upon people. Beauty is connected to this. So don't use that word. It's been tainted and so forth. And I thought about that, and I didn't know how I would talk about my work without using this word, beauty, a taboo word. So I just began to reframe it. I said, well, I am talking about beauty not from a Western perspective, but I'm talking about beauty from a Japanese perspective, which is a little bit different because Japanese have defined beauty as connected to sacrifice, particularly in nature. So the materials I use, the works that you see in the gallery, is pulverized minerals. Minerals are pulverized, crushed, in order to create this prismatic beauty. So something is sacrificed every time we enjoy food. Something is sacrificed when you see anybody on stage with amazing performance, as you'll see here in Golden College in music and theater. Hours of sacrifice, right, to make this performance work. That's the way the Japanese would have entered into this word beauty. And so I through my materials, I am literally creating that beauty, reminding us through our senses that this world exists and that actually you will be able to respond to it, even though intellectually you might deny this concept, period. And so this setback, let's say, of New York art world, creating a way for artists like me to make it difficult for somebody like me to exhibit, became an opportunity. Because once you switch that paradigm and explain a little bit about the materials and the ancient practice of art, I was able to actually get people's attention. A famous critic called me one day out of the blue in the studio. He had just attended one of my artist talks, and I talked about not only beauty from a Japanese context, but I quoted Isaiah 61. Another thing you're not supposed to do in your world is to quote the Bible and say that I'm actually a follower of Christ very boldly and say that, that matters. Because this idea of sacrifice means a lot to me. There's significance in that word, sacrifice. So it's not just Japanese art of Japanese beauty, historically validated and given to us as one paradigm. But to me, this comes from ancient Hebraic traditions into text written in Greek. And I think there's something here that we have lost in modern Western cultures. Actually, we wouldn't have modern Western cultures without this notion of sacrifice that God himself will give to the world. this particular reality of incarnation of Jesus. I mean, imagine me talking to people like this in the 90s and later on in New York City. But that's what I was called to do. So as I exhibited, I began to unravel some of these thoughts. And many of my thoughts are written in my books. I won't go into too much detail. Here's me painting, by the way, this photo that Haejin took. I paint outside in the summer. And after I painted this, deers came and they thought this was water. And so I was afraid they were going to step on it. They didn't, but that's kind of how I connect with nature and art and sacrifice and beauty. Ephesians 2:10, I spoke about this in commencement speech, and we are God's poema, where God's workmanship is a typical translation, a very industrial translation. It literally means we are God's poems. Created in Christ Jesus to do ergon, which is hard work. Ergon is like running the triathlon. It takes intentionality, it takes discipline. So we are God's masterpieces, I always say. Created to do the hard work of bringing that reality of beauty and justice into a broken world, into my life, into your lives. So I write about this in this book, Art and Faith. I won't go into it in too much detail, but let me just quote one passage here from this book, which I outline what I call theology of making, which is the theology that I live into as an artist. And I think it's somewhat helpful because, as you will know later, this is exactly what Genesis passages point to. I write here, the Greek word poieo, to make, to do, and related words, poema, here, that which has been made or done, and poietes, which we will talk about tomorrow in chapel, a maker or doer, appear more than 3,200 times in the Septuagint Greek version of the Hebrew Scriptures, and more than 80 times in the New Testament. But we don't hear about poetry, that God is seeking us to be poets. Note the significance of these words, which have to do with making. Some translators translate poieo as to do, as in the doers of the word in James 1, which reduces its generative possibilities and focuses on rather industrial sense of the word. Part of the theology of making is to bring full color to these words, which are often interpreted in a narrower sense. While it is not wrong to translate poieo or as to do, or poietes as doer, the emphasis on the maker will necessitate revisiting the passages that give such words their full significance. So this is throughout the Bible, not just here in Ephesians, and it is echoed in the understanding of what God did in creation. I always say God's imagination is. What does that mean? Well, for us, when we imagine, right, and hopefully it is a sanctified imagination that is working to mend the world. But for us, it takes time. It takes hard work to translate that vision, a dream, into reality. With God, there's no gap. God is fully sanctified, fully present, and therefore, when God imagines, it is. Now, we are living into God's imagination today. You and I are what Jesus imagined. That should shake us. we should be trembling at this thought that Jesus thought about, imagined, you and I, wrestling with the very thing that we wake up today wrestling with, and thought of the whole thing as Jesus' way of creating new creation through us. That's theology making. And of course, in Genesis, we see that God began with imagination that is becoming reality, right? God calls out creation. And in Jesus, this reality, through Jesus, we are asked to be filled by the Spirit. Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. We are the vehicles of the Spirit to carry out Jesus' dreams into reality. And that means that we have to deal with the very broken, corrupt, tainted systems. That is a guarantee that we will enter into the world and face that reality where they said, no, you can't talk about beauty. And you say, thank you. Because not only I'm going to talk about beauty, but I'm also going to talk about justice. And by the way, the English word fair is both. Something that is fair is just, and something that is fair is beautiful.
The psalmist says, God loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of his unfailing love. I didn't start out seeking justice or being interested in justice or loving justice because I was a very righteous person. I started out looking into justice because I love God. And I love Jesus. And the Bible says God loves justice and righteousness. So what is this justice that God loves so much? And I couldn't really find the answer, unfortunately, in law school. But in law school, I learned something quite effective in this kind of a lecture series, which is Socratic method. So let me pose this question before I begin. What is justice to you? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You may write it down. I may call on you, because it is Socratic method. Justice means blank. If you don't have a pen, think about it in your head. Many years ago, I was interviewing this lawyer with certain experience for a legal organization that was founded to serve the poor and marginalized in the city, in New York City, who couldn't afford to hire an attorney for their civil matters. So me and my friends, we started operating this organization to provide that free legal service. And so we're looking for a legal director, and we had a fantastic candidate. He came, he was very passionate about justice, and he wanted to seek justice for the poor, wanted to do justice, steward it, make it more just, New York City. So I thought it was so fantastic. At the end of that interview, I had one last question, so I asked him, you sound fantastic. And you use the word justice like 200 times in your answers. So can you explain to me what you mean when you say justice? About 30 seconds of pause. like what we had. And at the end, and I waited. And it's okay if you don't answer right away in your interview. I waited, and he said, I don't know how to answer that. It really broke my heart because, yes, we know, many of you I know, can recite Micah 6:8, right? Seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with the Lord. And we know that this is a calling for all of us, right? It's not just given to lawyers, justice advocates. But what does that even mean? I think it might be easier for us to imagine a situation of injustice. So let me give you another 20 seconds to think about a situation that you already know that is unjust, that you can call it, this is injustice. I've traveled the world and I saw a lot of injustice in this world. We know this world is broken, although, yes, God's imagination is. Yet, we also have this fallenness in it. I met many children who's been sold into slavery by neighbors, sometimes by their parents. I've met many children who became orphaned because of war, lost in the societal system. Many women who's been exploited, who's been abused by violence. Neighbors whose land has been taken away because her husband passed away, and the neighbor had a machete. And these are a clear picture of injustice. We also know stories of false witness, people stealing from another, and hurting other people because of greed. And I find something common in those situations. And I call that beauty broken. Whether it's a person who's been exploited, or a relationship has been severed because of betrayal, or the creation being groaning and suffering because of our greed, something that God created in Genesis through his imagination, the creation, the world, and humans. And through that creation, God created, very naturally, relationships. His relationship with the creation and our relationship with one another and God and our relationship with the creation. And when injustice happens, those relationships and God's creation suffers. Something that God called in Genesis 1 and 2, Tov, good and beautiful, has been abused, destroyed, and broken. So people ask me, why do you do the work of justice? And my answer is very clear, very simple. I want to restore the beauty that has been broken. And that is the work of justice. There are 3 words that are shown in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, mishpat and tzedakah, in the New Testament, dikaiosune. And I think the difficulty of us kind of defining, trying to fill in the blank justice means, I think it's also partially because of this difficulty of translating these words into English. There are sometimes English word is, of course, beautiful. The language is beautiful. T.S. Eliot's quartet is beautiful. There's always this limitation when we're trying to translate these ancient words into a modern language. So mishpa is generally translated into justice, but it means much deeper than just punishing the wrongdoer or restoring the victim. And even though restoration of a victim, it's not just about patching little Band-Aid on the wound, right? Because a lot of times the injustice that we experience or we see, although we see a glimpse of it now, but it has a generational background as well as impact. Tzedakah is translated generally as righteousness, and of course we know it's not about self-righteousness, right? It's not about morality. But when you look deeper into it, and we explain it a lot more in our upcoming book, but it's ultimately about flourishing relationship. Bless you. And that flourishing relationship that God created from the creation of Genesis 1 and 2 is going to look beautiful. When you have flourishing relationship, that is a state of beauty. And I think maybe that's why God said justice and righteousness is the foundation of the Lord's throne. Perhaps why God said, when righteousness and justice is in this world, then you will see my unfailing love, the ultimate beauty. The kaiosune in the New Testament, it covers both the word justice and righteousness. And it's quite inadequate, actually, to just put it that way. So recently, our good friend, Auntie Wright, who wrote the foreword to Mako's Art and Faith book, he did a new translation. And what he did was actually really brilliant. Although it doesn't quite capture the depth of this word, the kaiosune, he had translated that word not just into righteousness or justice throughout the New Testament. He actually used different words like God's redeeming plan, what is right, sometimes justice, sometimes righteousness, pursuant to the context that this word was used in the New Testament. So when we think about much more easily the situation of injustice, and we think about how that injustice is so much suffering, that involves so much suffering of not only the person who's experiencing that injustice, but also all the relationship that is attached to it. Another thing that I didn't quite get to learn in law school, but through practice that I got to understand is this. Actually, lawyer's job or any advocate's job is to be able to identify what has been broken in different relationships and come into a place of restoration. Here's the situation. Some of my clients, many of my clients are actually business clients, some nonprofits. They'll all come in with either a great opportunity that they want a lawyer's help to bring them into a new season. Because in that new opportunity, there are new relationships forming. Whether it's with a client, service provider, an investor, or another partner, they want us to help them understand their relationship better so that they can have tzedakah, the flourishing relationship in that business or nonprofit endeavor. Sometimes they will come in because their relationships have been broken. An employee has stolen something. A counterparty has not fulfilled their contract terms. So there is a breach that has happened. And that's where lawyers come in, advocates come in, to mend that, but not to punish the counterparty or to extract from the other, but mend that relationship in a way that they can move forward to the next season. Kintsugi has become quite popular in the recent years, and you've seen a lot in like commercials and movies and songs sometimes, and I think they even like K-pop demon hunters, but kintsugi, this ancient, and we're very happy about that. Yet there is this like deeper understanding that is attached to this ancient art form, where broken pieces of a tea bowl gets mended into something that's more beautiful and more valuable than before. What happens with kintsugi is when the pieces are broken, right? When a tea bowl that has been serving a very important person, and then it gets dropped in, sometimes in places like Japan, there are a lot of earthquakes, so the bowl will break very naturally. But because these bowls have a meaning, because it serves somebody important, it serves somebody that's dear to them, meaning there has been a relationship that has been formed, the tea masters will hold on to these fragments and wait until these fragments are ready to be mended. They do not rush into it. They wait on it. We call that process beholding. And after that, they put them together. But when they put them together, a very unique material called urushi, which is Japanese lacquer, is used. This is a binding material. The equivalent, not quite, an equivalent will be a super glue. That is a joke. It is not an equivalent of super glue. But this urushi that we rarely talk about, actually, when we talk about kintsugi, because we talk more about the gold, which is much more decorative, which makes it, accentuates the scars and turn that into a beauty. But before that process is done, we must bind these fragments together with urushi. And that urushi comes from a sacrifice, a heavy sacrifice by urushi tree. And that actually story is beautifully written in my Mako's upcoming book. But that urushi, that binding material that is hidden behind these golden lines, are the ones that is binding these fragments together to be even stronger than before. And this urushi is actually much more precious than the gold. Yet, it's hidden. It's underneath. And this is one of the kintsugi bowls that has been mended lovingly by one of our facilitators of Academy Kintsugi that Mako and I co-founded during the pandemic to bring the message of hope of how when we see a situation of brokenness, like this broken bowl, it's very symbolic of a situations that you imagined of injustice. But for this bowl to be mended together, that requires beholding, being patient, and being able to see each fragment as worthy. Because why would you put them together if you don't consider these fragments worthy and beautiful? And the bowl on the right that is mended more beautifully and more valuable now, this bowl represents the restoration of the beauty that is not like the original bowl, but even more precious. So kintsugi peacemaking so this is a word that I coined, and I did a little bit of a wordplay here because kintsugi is putting pieces together. So it's kintsugi pieces, but now it's peace. So kintsugi peace is not just getting rid of violence or getting rid of a situation of injustice, but it's creating something new out of that fracture. Because of that fracture, a new opportunity and kintsugi-bo can become. And that starts with sanctified imagination that Mako talked about. I might go over 5 more minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. When you see this, what do you see? What does your imagination say to you? This should, first of all, make you feel, little uncomfortable. Because indeed, this is a former brothel, abandoned, next to a landfill, next to a snake temple. A few years ago, God brought me here. I entered this place. And when I was about to enter, I hesitated a little bit because I felt like there will be, I'll be greeted by maybe a million bacterias in this place. I was a little nervous. It was a pre-pandemic though. But I walked in because my friend, a slum pastor, was courageous enough to invite me into this abandoned former brothel. And there, God asked us this question: what do you see? Can you see? Can you imagine? Do you have the sanctified imagination to see beauty out of this ashes? And we say yes. And that place became this Sahasi Ember Center that now hosts 120 children of Embers International that whom are born into brothels as a second and third generation trafficking victims. We have another building right next to it now that can host their mothers. Because what we're doing is intergenerational work of restoring not just the trafficking victims, but their children who are destined into this intergenerational cycle of exploitation. Because that kind of intergenerational work, that kind of deeply rooted injustice can be stopped when we start seeing them as beautiful. The work of justice, I believe, must be beautiful. It's not just seeking beauty, seeking to restore and mend the beauty and create new beauty into new creation, but along the way, we must have beauty. The way that we do it, not just what we do, but the way we do it and why we do it must be around beauty, because that's where God's imagination is.
Work of beauty has to be just. And the way that we have began to look at even art itself under God's imagination is to create this environment of a portal into new creation where all of us can see, perhaps glimpse for 1 second, like this film, some place where all of our dreams collectively come together and become this new creation. And that is part of what I mean when I say we live and breathe into Jesus's imagination.
So,
we take,
with
Q&A?
that, I would love to take any questions you may have.
Please indicate. Certainly are interested in your.
Thank you so much for what you shared. It was so inspiring to hear. I love what you said at the beginning. You said artists provide mediation, that we don't look at the world in binaries. And I find, especially in America, we either see people who sort of view justice as this only like moral ethic, or you see people who just don't care about justice at all, who are apathetic or even complacent in it. And so what would you say to those individuals who, I guess, live on the extremes?
Oh, yeah. I think heart transformation, of course, is the work of God. But we can, of course, journey along those people. And I think for one, many of my friends who are now part of this journey might have once been like that, right? Because of lack of understanding and all of those things. So there will be a time. So that means we need to come along and not argue. And so I'll get to the UN story, but many people, so I've handled maybe over 500 lawsuits and never lost. And only by God's grace. And I resolved a lot of cases. And so people immediately, when I tell them that I'm a litigator, they say, oh, you must be so aggressive. You must love to argue. And so, and I have a very good response to all of that. And I say, when they say, oh, you love to argue. And it's like, no, I don't like to argue. I like to win. For my client. And no, actually, being aggressive makes you not so great lawyer. To be an excellent litigator, you actually need to have much more grace and not aggression, because you have to be able to hold your ground against aggression that comes from your counterparty and be assertive with gentleness, because then the judges will listen, the jury will listen. So when we presented this beauty and justice talk very briefly at Mako's exhibition opening in New York City during the pandemic, this ambassador to the UN came and spoke at the end of that talk, came over and he said, I really enjoyed your talk. And it was very something new to him. And he said, I traveled the world as an ambassador, and I saw a lot of injustice. And I also saw justice being cruel. And then perhaps that is not the justice that we are seeking, right? So when we, of course, we live in this very transactional world, right? And we're trying to extract from one another, zero-sum game, maximum profit. And these are the kind of tension that all of you are going to be entering into. And that's the reality, that's the fallenness, that is a fracture, right? But then when we see those fractures, like Kintsugi, we will love for you to think about that, behold that situation, and not be scared by it or become judgmental of it, but hold that tension and see a Genesis moment. Because when God created, the world was just kind of chaotic, right? It wasn't evil, but it was chaotic. There's a darkness, right? And then when God's imagination hovered over God's spirit, we came to be. The Tov, the very good and beautiful. So that will be the kind of posture that we have. And when you have those people on either side, remember, grace. Yeah.
Hi. How do you find the Lord's beauty in your guys' daily lives?
How do I?
How do you find the Lord's beauty in your daily lives as an artist and as a lawyer?
That's a great question. And I actually, in all of our books, we write about that in the essays. And we have a lot of common overlaps before we met that spoke to us about that very question. My next book out that's our book, and it's coming out. We just got this copy. It's a beautiful book. Pre-release copy, so you can take a look at it. But it's about this journey of an artist that enters into this reality, of the transactional reality marketplace, this ego fest that is the art world. And what we talked about, this kintsugi lives of moving into every situation and considering every setback as an opportunity, a Genesis moment. And we believe that it is, and we preach that, and we believe that is part of Jesus' imagination, is that he wants us to live into his Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor, right? So this upside down kingdom breaking into this world, which is so tainted and so disheartening if you didn't have Jesus. So I would say Jesus is the very heart of it. Psalm 27, we quote a lot, seeing beauty of the Lord in the temple. And beauty throughout Scripture is connected with goodness. The words used are often translated as perhaps beautiful, but it's much more robust. So we, Haejin always is reminding me to live into God's promise, God's presence, coram Deo. Every day, every moment is God's moment, and which is Genesis moment.
Yeah. So, seeing God's beauty, Jesus in each other is really important, and especially in a marriage context, what we are called to be to each other is to be the stewards of Jesus in each other. So like I don't just see Mako, but I see Jesus in Mako, and therefore I am called to steward so that he can be the kind of God's imagination, right? That God intended him to be. But also we remind each other of the beauty around, of course, our home with the nature, but also, and we enjoy that a lot. We're birders, so we watch birds, and we do garden. Well, Mako does the garden. I enjoy the garden. But also, Embers has a daily prayer discipline. So our staff will stop everything at 11:30. And what does 11:30 mean to you? It means to me is a moment that I feel like I am about to accomplish something, right? Towards the lunchtime, right? So you start your day 8:39, and then you're like, oh, I'm getting something done. And that's when we stop everything and surrender. And it's a daily discipline for us. And then we gather as a team and then pray for half an hour, and then we're going to lunch together as a team. And that's the moment that we remember the children and their mothers, who are not just people who are in need, but people that exhibit God's beauty that we have honored to serve. So because as we have been called to serve our neighbors, if we do this out of moral duty, there will be limitation. We will get exhausted. We will get frustrated because we won't get the kind of things that we deserve. But if we do this because we are gazing upon the beauty, many of times, of course, broken because of sin, but yet the beauty that is to be restored towards cosmic wedding to come, then we can find that beauty every single day.
Do you ever find it challenging to justify being introverted and wanting to spend hours and hours in the studio writing and doing your art when there's so many things like embers that need to be attended to?
That's a great question. Actually, traveling with Haejin and being part of just such a privilege to be part of Embers. I strangely, I am there in this cacophony of what is India, Mumbai, and I actually have said what Haejin started out saying in the film, that unless my art, then the beauty that I create reaches the darkest realms, it's not complete. And that what I said became prophetic because I really saw this journey that I spent my entire life on of creating beauty being completed at Sahasi Embers, that it is the end, in a sense, completion of certainly all I've attempted to do in advocacy, but also it is in a strange way a place of fulfillment that I feel actually at home there in this brothel district, in this children's center, kids running around, high introvert. Like, how could that be, right? But that is precisely what happens when you walk into Jesus' imagination. You become part of the body, and you realize that what you have struggled with in your life and what you have been made to do, and certainly high, attunement to your feelings and so forth, is what makes me a good artist, right? But that is pulled out into this unlikely place where, last time Haejin organized doing art class with the kids, and it was kind of last minute. I didn't know what was happening, and I would have thought, well, maybe 3 or 4 kids, and it turns out to be like 70 kids all at once, all sitting around, and I was totally stressed out, and I'm like, what am I going to do? But that I think I will. To the end of my day, I will never forget what actually happened during that time. It was very short, maybe 30 minutes. And the things that I saw children draw with crayons, with color markers, with paint. I have to say that was one of the most beautiful things I ever seen, right? And India, it's an amazing culture because you walk into the slums, the darkest slums, and these certainly they are waiting for us to be hospitable, but these people, especially women, dress up in sari. No two are alike. They are full of color, and here we are wearing gray T-shirts. Walking into this, and they're greeting us in this just full of beauty, and I do now believe that that is something that I need as an artist to experience, so that my art can be affected by what we experience in.
And thank you for the question. And I suspect that it's more for the students that you pose that question. You will have that tension as if there is a binary, right? There is like this, people who are creating useless, frivolous, extravagant things that is not meaningful in the world, right? And there are like a group of people who are like saving lives and restoring people, right? And it's actually not like that. So I hope, this is not a book tour. It kind of is becoming one right now. But that this book, it's coming out in April of 26, will give you more insight into what we shared today. But let's say, many artists here, you're called to, if God has called you to be an artist, to make things like every day, like what Mako does, please do it excellently. Do it with so much love. You gotta love your materials, you gotta love your space, you gotta love what you are creating. Now, I'm actually the one who's protecting Mako's studio time, right? So this is very special time for us to be out, but I make sure that he has his studio time every single day unless we're traveling. And the reason is this, Mako does it with not only excellence and with so much love, but you have to look into why he's doing it and how he does it. So again, you can see like what's happening, what's doing, like what you are called to do. We focus so much on that we forget why and we forget how. The reason why Mako creates such amazing art and writes such amazing books is because he's giving himself away to the world. This is not for his egotistic expression. And God has never called us to be a self-expression, self-glorifying, stewards, right? That's not actually stewardship. Mako creates to give away to the world, to show what beauty actually means and to introduce the new creation into this side of eternity that you can taste and experience that glimpse. And you have that in your gallery. And because of that, he needs to be in the studio more. Right? He needs to create more. And that's my job to make sure that that can be stewarded. And so I encourage all of you artists to do that.
Yeah, and the listening room at the exhibit is for you introverts. For those of you, I love sitting in what I call listening rooms, where we create as spaces dedicated to sit still. And you can sit there as long as you want. There's beautiful music being played by a Pulitzer winner composer, Susie Barra. And you can sit there as long as you want. And that's, for me, heaven. You can just stare at these pieces. And then these pieces, because they are, the blueberry piece that's in the back has over 200 layers of prismatic. So you walk in and you see this kind of grayish monotone. And then you might walk out with some other vision. Through that portal, that was something that you will see. So a lot can happen when we slow down, period, any moment. But art is a vehicle through which we learn to train our imaginations to be sanctified. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to remind you all that you can come back for more in chapel tomorrow, get more chapel credit. Also, the gallery show on Saturday at 4 p.m. You are all invited to attend that as well. Thank you so much for coming. This is the first in a series of events which will take us throughout the academic year. Watch your email, watch signs going up as we open up these events. Look forward to continuing this conversation. Have a good afternoon and a good evening, all of you.